Hi, it's Nana. Welcome to the Good Friday teaching. As a kid, as a child, and as a teenager, especially a sarcastic teenager, when it all started coming together and it all started making sense to me, when I realized that we call Good Friday the day that Jesus was crucified, I thought, we are awful people. We're horrible. What's good about it? They beat Jesus to the point that he was unrecognizable. They flogged him. They spit on him. They put a crown of thorns on him and pushed it on his head where he was bleeding everywhere. They mocked him. They spit on him. They pulled out his beard. What is good about Good Friday? Tell me. Well, I'm going to tell you because nobody told me. I had to figure this out way later in life, which really irks me. But anyway, we'll get on past that. I believe we could call this a Eucharisteo. Ann Voskamp says it so much better. What Ann has taught me, what the Lord has taught me through Ann Voskamp is about ugly beautifuls. Jesus came as a child. He came as an infant. He was born of a virgin, grew up, led a sinless life. He was perfect. He is our perfect sacrificial lamb. And they put him on the cross. They had a mock trial. He was crucified. He was found worthy of death for speaking the truth about who he was. All of his friends have fallen away. Peter has denied him. Judas has betrayed him. And something I forgot to say at the end of yesterday's teaching is early Friday morning, Judas takes the money back to the chief priest and says, I was wrong. I sinned. Take this money. They won't take it. He throws it at them. And they say it's blood money. So they knew it was blood money. And they couldn't put it back in the treasury. So they bought a field. And Judas, where they bury people, they call it the field of blood because it was blood money, and which is pretty tragic. And Judas goes out and hangs himself. Yeah. So he realized that what he had done was wrong. Anyway, we get back to Jesus and Good Friday. It's good. Of course, we've talked. I just talked about why it's bad, why it's ugly. They beat Jesus to the point where he was not recognizable. They had beat him. They had flogged him on his back. Of course, they're going to put that raw bareback up against that rough cross. They've nailed his hands and his feet to the cross and waited for him to die. What a horrible death. And as you hang on a cross, the position that you're in, you're basically going to suffocate in your own blood is what happened. Your lungs fill up. You can't get enough air because you can't push your body up enough to stretch everything out, your diaphragm up and out this way enough to get air in. And so your lungs fill up with your own fluids and your blood, and you suffocate. Jesus, he chose when to die. He said, it's finished. What he came to earth to do was complete. Not his life, but his work. His work on earth was finished, and he gave up his spirit. He didn't wait for it. He didn't wait to die of natural causes. He said, it's finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He gave it up, and he was done. Until Sunday. which is why we have Easter, because that's when he rises from the dead, and that's a little further down the road. But it's Good Friday because we have the ugly, which I didn't know I was gonna cry. Which was the crucifixion of our Lord and the horrible, horrible treatment that they gave him Thursday night into Friday morning. The mock trial with the Jewish leaders, and then they take him to Pilate, and there's this back and forth between the Roman leaders, and he says to the Jewish people, because it was a tradition that he release one of the captives, one of the people that they have in prison, that he released one prisoner back to the people. And he takes the worst prisoner and says, hey, do you want me to release this guy or Jesus, King of the Jews? He's done nothing wrong. They're like, he didn't count on that. He didn't count on them wanting the murderer, the thief, to be released and the innocent to be put to death, which is Jesus. So they say Barabbas. He says, what do I do with this Jesus? They say, crucify him. Crucify him. And so they do. They take him right then, put the cross on his back. And of course, he is beaten so badly that he cannot carry his cross. And so they grab Simon of Cyrene, who was actually a believer, and make him carry Jesus's cross up the hill and to Golgotha. And that Golgotha is how they say it. I had the privilege of meeting somebody who was she's a Jewish lady who was a Jewish Christian, and she grew up in Jerusalem at the foothills. Her school and her church were actually at the foothills of Golgotha. And she said, as you were playing on the playground, you could look up to the hill and you could see the skull. Now, because people say, I've heard people say, oh, it's not real, it's not there. It's only because, that's where they killed people, is why they called it the place of the skull. And she said, no, honey, make no mistake. As a young girl, I knew that the story of Jesus was true. Now, remember, she's Jewish, but she's a believer. She follows Jesus, because she said, I knew that story was true because as a young girl who played on the playground, I could look up and I could see the skull. And she said, it's real. Don't let anybody tell you it's not. And I guess I met her 10 or so years ago. Probably more than that now. But anyway, I loved that Jesus put her in my life at that time so I could say, yep, this is an eyewitness. She lived there, she grew up there, and she can say, she wasn't an eyewitness to the death, but she could say, you know what? The testimony in the Bible where it says they put him on a cross at a place called Golgotha is how she said it. The place of the skull really looks like a skull. It's true. And that was one of the reasons why she believed, was because every day as a child, she was reminded of where they took Jesus and where they killed him.